Creo que lo voy a mejorar el siguiente año, sin ninguna duda. Porque el hecho de tener un jugador que se movía por donde él quería implica que hay situaciones de juego que yo no controlo. El año que viene las voy a controlar todas. Todas, sin excepción.
Luis Enrique became exactly what Kylian Mbappe was afraid of. The Spanish manager ended up proving something that many people refuse to believe. Football is still a team game.
Un equipo en el que hay 11 estrellas. Eso es el fútbol. 11 estrellas. No queremos solo una, queremos 11. Eso es lo que tenemos nosotros ahora mismo.
The facts are impossible to ignore. Kylian Mbappe spent 7 years at PSG and never managed to lift the Champions League trophy. The moment he left, Paris Saint-Germain won the 2025 Champions League. Not only that, they became just the third club in European football history to complete the sextuple. And then, 1 year later, they did it again. Back-to-back Champions League titles. 2 European crowns arriving immediately after the departure of the player who was supposed to be the face of the project. And if you ever feel unlucky, mate, just think about how brutally football has treated Mbappe since that transfer. His first season at Real Madrid ended without a single major trophy. Ousmane Dembélé became the Ballon d'Or winner. His second season ended with another nada pleat. PSG lifted the Champions League for a second consecutive year. Barcelona humiliated Real Madrid in every major final they played. And in both seasons that Mbappe spent in Madrid, Barcelona took La Liga away from them in the decisive moments. Even Luis Enrique celebrated it. Today, Dembélé is fighting for a second Ballon d'Or. Luis Enrique is widely considered the best manager in world football. And Mbappe, the coldest story in football. And the craziest part is that this conversation is not even about goals. Because let's be honest, Mbappe remains a scoring monster. He scored 44 goals in his first season at Madrid and followed it up with 42 more in his second. Numbers that would make almost any striker look legendary. But while Mbappe's work translated into individual scoring records, Luis Enrique's work translated into something much bigger: trophies. A historic treble with Barcelona's MSN. A third Champions League title in his managerial career, and the transformation of a PSG side that spent years failing in Europe into the most feared team on the planet. Time has a funny way of putting everyone in their place, and the numbers are absolutely ruthless. During the 2023-24 season, when Mbappe was still the superstar of the Parc des Princes, PSG scored 124 goals, averaging roughly 2.3 goals per game. Then came the 2024-25 season. No Mbappe, no supposed franchise player. The result, PSG exploded for 176 goals, averaging 2.7 goals per match, while conquering Europe. And this season, the machine kept rolling. Luis Enrique's PSG scored another 135 goals, maintaining a staggering average of 2.5 goals per game. 2 years without Mbappe, 2 Champions Leagues, 2 seasons without missing his goals. The present has been brutally cold, and the results have been even colder. Take a look at this. And that's what makes this story so fascinating. Because if we're being fair, Kylian Mbappe did everything he was supposed to do when he arrived in Paris. He joined PSG in 2017 with one mission: become the player who would finally deliver the Champions League. And individually, he absolutely succeeded.
Sí, tengo el sueño de ganar la Champions con París, seguro. Es un paso más ahora. Contra un gran equipo.
In 308 appearances for Paris Saint-Germain, Mbappe scored 256 goals and provided 110 assists. He became the club's all-time leading goalscorer and won 14 domestic trophies with the French Giants. His individual dominance was outrageous. He finished as Ligue 1's top scorer 6 consecutive times between 2018 and 2024, something nobody had ever achieved before. His most destructive league season came in 2018-19, when he scored 33 goals in just 29 matches. Then came the historic 2021-22 campaign, where Mbappe became the first player in Ligue 1 history to finish as both the league's top scorer with 28 goals and top assist provider with 17 assists in the same season. As if that wasn't enough, he won the UNFP Player of the Year award 5 consecutive times between 2019 and 2024. Nobody had ever dominated that honour in France the way Mbappe did. And in the Champions League, the numbers were elite there too. 42 goals in 64 Champions League matches for PSG. A monster, a phenomenon, a player capable of destroying any defence in Europe. But there is one stain on his legacy in Paris that can never be erased. He never conquered Europe. Year after year, PSG failed. In 2017-18, his first season, Real Madrid eliminated PSG in the round of 16. Cristiano Ronaldo's side won 5-2 on aggregate, and Mbappe barely made an impact. In 2018-19 came one of the greatest collapses in modern Champions League history. PSG won 2-0 at Old Trafford and looked safely through. Then a Manchester United side full of injuries and academy players somehow won 3-1 in Paris. Mbappe scored in the first leg, but missed key chances in the second. PSG were out. In 2019-20 came the closest moment of all, the pandemic tournament in Lisbon, the first Champions League final in PSG history, the golden opportunity. But with the trophy within touching distance, Mbappe missed a huge chance against Manuel Neuer, and Kingsley Coman's goal gave Bayern Munich a 1-0 victory. The dream survived another year, in 2020-21, after eliminating Barcelona and Bayern Munich, including Mbappe's legendary hat-trick at Camp Nou. PSG reached the semi-finals, but Pep Guardiola's Manchester City outplayed them completely. PSG lost 4-1 on aggregate, while Mbappe missed the second leg through injury. Then came the nightmare everyone remembers, the Bernabeu disaster, the Karim Benzema disaster, the 2021-22 round of 16. With Lionel Messi now in the squad, Mbappe was sensational. He scored the winner in Paris, scored again in Madrid, and PSG led 2-0 on aggregate, with barely 30 minutes remaining. Then football happened. A Donnarumma mistake opened the door. Benzema smelled blood, and 17 minutes later, he had completed a hat-trick. PSG were eliminated. Mbappe had been the best player across both matches, and it still wasn't enough. In 2022-23, Bayern Munich returned to finish the job again. PSG looked flat, disconnected, and completely outclassed. Mbappe and Messi were isolated. Bayern won 3-0 on aggregate, and another European campaign ended in frustration. Then came 2023-24, his final season, his final chance. Luis Enrique was on the touchline. The route to the final looked perfect after victories over Real Sociedad and Barcelona. And then Borussia Dortmund happened, a 1-0 defeat in Germany, another 1-0 defeat in Paris.
Area where the ball's going.
The final European night of Mbappe's PSG career ended with shots hitting the post, yellow shirts throwing themselves into every challenge, and 80,000 supporters watching their greatest player fail to complete the mission one last time.
Pour nous, personne. Donc non, je pense pas que ce soit le problème. Le groupe était serein comme depuis le début de la saison.
7 years, hundreds of goals, countless records, 14 domestic trophies, 42 Champions League goals, and yet not a single Champions League title. That is the cruel contradiction of Kylian Mbappe's PSG story. Because individually he became the greatest player in the club's history, but collectively he left before the dream finally came true. So the question is simple, mate. What actually happened to Kylian Mbappe? Because individual talent is clearly not the problem. We've already seen the goal-scoring machine he is, and you can't even argue that he had bad teammates. At PSG, Mbappe shared the pitch with world-class stars like Edinson Cavani, Neymar, and Lionel Messi. In the 2022-23 season alone, the famous trio produced 22 goals and 13 assists in just 22 matches, with Neymar becoming his most frequent provider, assisting him 26 times throughout their partnership. The attacking firepower was outrageous. Yet despite all that talent, PSG never managed to win the Champions League. And this is where things become uncomfortable. Mbappe struggled with certain personalities inside the dressing room.
Foi fundamental, eu chamava ele de Golden Boy, né? Então eu sempre brincava com ele, falava que ele ia ser dos melhores, sempre ajudava, sempre conversava com ele, era um menino que ia na minha casa, a gente saía pra jantar junto, a gente teve bons anos de parceria, assim. Só que depois quando veio o Messi, eu acho que ele ficou pouco enciumado, não queria me dividir com ninguém.
Never fully embraced Luis Enrique's demanding high-pressing philosophy.
Michael Jordan cogía de los huevos a todos sus compañeros y se ponía a defender como un hijo de puta. Tú tienes que dar ese ejemplo primero como persona y como jugador.
And because of his talent, he had become practically untouchable in Paris. Then came the great irony. The moment he left, Luis Enrique built exactly the type of team Mbappe feared. A real team, a collective machine, because football is a team sport, and being a team player makes all the difference. That's why Ousmane Dembélé won the Ballon d'Or. That's why players like Michael Olise have exploded. They run, they press, they fight for every ball, and sacrifice themselves for the collective. And that has become one of the biggest criticisms of Mbappe since moving to Madrid. The expectation was that Real Madrid would become unstoppable. After all, this was a team that had just won La Liga and the Champions League. Add Mbappe to Vinicius Jr. and Rodrigo, and surely Europe was finished. Reality had other plans. Mbappe formed an explosive front three with Vinicius and Rodrigo. In his first season, he received an assist from Rodrigo every 13 minutes they shared on the pitch. although his connection with Vinicius was far less fluid. Together, the trio produced 34 goals and 34 assists, while Mbappe himself scored 31 La Liga goals and 44 goals across all competitions. But once again, collective success never arrived. In Europe, Arsenal eliminated Madrid convincingly. Declan Rice destroyed them with 2 stunning free kicks in the first leg, before Bukayo Saka delivered the final blow in the return match. The same pattern kept repeating. Mbappe shined individually, the team suffered collectively, and the biggest winner from Madrid's collapse was Hansi Flick. Barcelona beat Madrid everywhere that mattered. First came the Spanish Super Cup final. Barcelona crushed Real Madrid 5-2. Mbappe scored, but Flick's tactical plan completely dismantled Madrid's structure, and Barca lifted the trophy with ease. Then came the Copa del Rey final. Barcelona defeated Madrid 3-2. Once again Mbappe scored. Once again it wasn't enough. Once again Barcelona celebrated, while Madrid walked away empty-handed. And things only became worse during the following season. Questions began appearing about Mbappe's adaptation to the team.
Mbappe, instead of staying as a 9, he always goes into Vinicius' path.
Critics accused him of being too individualistic, disconnecting from defensive pressing and failing to integrate naturally into the tactical structure. Inside Madrid, debates emerged about whether his presence was actually hurting the collective balance. There were also dressing room controversies. One example came when Mbappe travelled to Italy during an injury recovery period. The trip had club permission, but it reportedly frustrated teammates who were fighting through crucial moments of the season. Physical problems also played their part. Hamstring injuries and muscular setbacks prevented him from finding continuity during key stretches of the campaign. And despite finishing as La Liga's top scorer with 25 goals and scoring 42 goals in all competitions, people talked more about Madrid's failures than Mbappe's goals.
So he had those goals for PSG, but it didn't make them a team.
Right. But he also, the manager has to, or the coach has to build the whole team around where he isn't, because he's a centre forward. That's where he's playing in the team. He's playing as a centre forward, but he's hardly ever there. He goes out to the left wing, he goes out to the right wing, he goes into. He's almost saying, "I'll do what I want to do." So the manager, when he's doing his tactics, how do I fit other players around that and get people getting into the box? How can I do this? Because Mbappe does what he wants to do, and you can't run a team like that.
Barcelona beat Madrid again in the 2026 Spanish Super Cup final, winning 3-2 in Jeddah and delivering another psychological blow. Then came one of the biggest embarrassments in modern Madrid history. Albacete eliminated Real Madrid from the Copa del Rey with a stunning 3-2 victory. Just days after losing the Super Cup, Madrid's galaxy of stars collapsed against a second division side. The decisive blow arrived in La Liga. Barcelona secured the league title by defeating Real Madrid 2-0 at Camp Nou on May 10th, 2026. The most controversial part, Mbappe didn't even play the biggest match of the season. While Barcelona celebrated another title, Mbappe posted a Hala Madrid message from home during the game, creating a media storm around his relationship with the coaching staff and his role inside the club. Then came another Champions League heartbreak. Bayern Munich eliminated Real Madrid 5-4 on aggregate in the quarter-finals. Madrid appeared to be advancing after goals from Arda Güler and Mbappe, but Eduardo Camavinga's late red card changed everything. Bayern completed a dramatic comeback through Luis Diaz and Michael Olise, sending Mbappe home from Europe once again. And by the end of the season, one of the biggest stories wasn't even football. It was his public disagreement with Álvaro Arbeloa.
No ha jugado porque el míster me ha dicho que para él soy el cuarto delantero de la plantilla, detrás de Mastontuano, Vini y Gonzalo. Al final acepto y juego el tiempo que tengo a jugar.
But perhaps the most worrying part wasn't any specific incident. It was the feeling around the club. Because Mbappe's numbers remain absurd. 86 goals in 103 matches across his first 2 seasons at Real Madrid. Those are superstar numbers. Yet inside the dressing room and among supporters, an uncomfortable debate has emerged. Madrid often looked better without him. In May alone, Real Madrid won just 1 of 6 matches when Mbappe started. When he didn't play or began on the bench, the team recorded 7 victories and only 1 defeat. Of course, statistics never tell the full story, but they do raise difficult questions, because the same problems seem to follow him. The lack of chemistry with Vinicius, the ego battles, the defensive work rate, the distractions and the perception that he never fully understood what Real Madrid represents. The talent is undeniable, the goals are inevitable, but sometimes his attitude cost him far more than his ability can compensate for. And that's exactly why the contrast with Luis Enrique's PSG has become impossible to ignore. Luis Enrique was right about Mbappe, and that's exactly why PSG became the best team in Europe. For Luis Enrique, everything starts with movement and sacrifice. His football has always been ambitious, attacking and collective. We already saw it at its peak with Neymar, Suarez and Messi at Barcelona between 2014 and 2017. For him, there are no untouchable stars beyond Lionel Messi, the only player worthy of special privileges.
Messi puede jugar de lo que quiera. Messi es una cosa diferente. O sea, es que es ridículo ya que comparen premios, melones de oro, lo que quieran comparar, es ridículo. O sea, es ridículo, es que no ha habido, no, pero ya no con los actuales.
That is why he never panicked when Kylian Mbappe left for Real Madrid in search of the Champions League. While most people expected PSG to collapse, Luis Enrique saw an opportunity. He saw the future, and he built an authors team where everyone runs, everyone presses, and everyone sacrifices themselves. Even Ousmane Dembélé, the Ballon d'Or winner, became a relentless worker off the ball, the exact thing Mbappe often ignored, to the point that Luis Enrique sometimes substituted him at half-time because he wasn't contributing enough defensively. What followed has been remarkable. Luis Enrique won back-to-back Champions League titles with virtually the same squad. The only major change came in goal after Donnarumma's departure, opening the door for Matvei Safonov, who quickly established himself as one of the revelations of European football. In defence, Marquinhos remained the leader, but Willian Pacho evolved into an absolute monster under Luis Enrique's guidance. On the flanks, PSG possess arguably the two best fullbacks in world football. Achraf Hakimi, now a three-time Champions League winner, and Nuno Mendes, who many consider the best left-back on the planet. Then comes the midfield, which might be the strongest in football. Fabian Ruiz, Vitinha, and João Neves have become the perfect combination of creativity, control, and sacrifice. 5 years ago, Vitinha was struggling to break into Wolves' starting 11. Today, he has won Player of the Match while lifting his second Champions League trophy and is being discussed among the best midfielders in the world. João Neves has been just as important, with decisive moments against Chelsea, Liverpool, and Bayern, while doing the dirty work that Luis Enrique values more than anyone. Together they form the engine room of Europe's best team. And up front, the transformation has been even more brutal. Dembélé delivered another Ballon d'Or level Champions League campaign, a goal in the round of 16.
Fofana back, Dembélé holding on, decided to go with a look.
A brace in the quarter-finals.
This is Dembélé.
A hat-trick and assist in the semi-finals. And another goal in the final. Yet even he was arguably overshadowed by Kylian Kvaratskhelia. The Georgian finished as PSG's top scorer with 10 goals and the highest average rating in the squad. He produced 4 goal contributions against Chelsea, 2 against Liverpool, 3 against Bayern, and even won the penalty in the final. His Champions League campaign was historic. And then there is Désiré Doué, the young hero who may have saved PSG's season. Without his emergence, PSG might not have survived the early knockout rounds. He delivered 3 goal contributions in the comeback against Monaco, assisted against Chelsea,
Dembélé holding on, decided to go with a look.
Scored against Liverpool,
This is Doué, and the deflection.
and produced 2 assists against Bayern. And perhaps the most frightening part, he is only 20 years old. That is why Luis Enrique never feared losing Mbappe. He built something much more dangerous than a superstar. He built an inevitable attack, and that is exactly what Mbappe feared most, that Luis Enrique's vision would prove correct, that the coach would demonstrate once and for all that teams win trophies while individuals break records. When everyone thought PSG would sink after Mbappe's departure, Luis Enrique promised they would become stronger. 2 consecutive Champions League titles later, he has silenced the entire football world.
Yo firmé en el Paris Saint-Germain la temporada pasada para hacer un equipo. Eso lo puedo garantizar. Voy a hacer un equipo, hasta el último día que yo esté en París, voy a hacer un equipo seguro. Un equipo que tenga identidad, un equipo que sea valiente, atrevido, que juegue bien al fútbol, o lo intente.
As Luis Enrique famously said, the statistics are there. I'd rather have 4 players scoring 12 goals each than 1 player scoring 40 goals. And he proved it. Doué scored 13 goals, Dembélé scored 20, Kvaratskhelia scored 19, Barcola scored 13, Gonzalo Ramos added 12. The goals were shared, the responsibility was shared, and the trophies followed. The consequences for Luis Enrique's legacy have been enormous. With his 3rd Champions League trophy, he now sits alongside Zinedine Zidane, Bob Paisley, and Pep Guardiola among the 2nd most successful managers in European Cup history. Only Carlo Ancelotti, with 5 titles, remains ahead of him. He also became the first Spanish manager since José Villalonga in the 1950s to win back-to-back European Cups. His record in finals is simply absurd, 12 victories in 13 finals, and in Paris he has become a legend. Since arriving 3 seasons ago, Luis Enrique has won 12 of the 15 trophies available to him. The only setbacks were a Champions League semi-final defeat in 2024, a Club World Cup final loss against Chelsea, and an early exit in the French Cup. Everything else has ended with silverware. His collection now includes 3 League One titles, 3 French Super Cups, 2 Champions League trophies, 2 French Cups, 1 UEFA Super Cup, and 1 Intercontinental Cup. In the end, Luis Enrique didn't replace Mbappe. He replaced the idea that one player could be bigger than the team, and that is why PSG became exactly what Kylian Mbappe was afraid of, a machine that no longer needed him. Meanwhile,